All right, y'all, let's get into it. Jess Hilarious. I know I typically don't cover pop culture on this channel, but Jess Hilarious, co-host of The Breakfast Club, made another transphobic comment. And it wasn't random. It was pretty revealing. Let's see what Jess Hilarious had to say to Lene Renee just the other day on The Breakfast Club.
I'm single now, and they're like, so what, you want like a Mark Lamont Hill? No, like no shade to Mark, he's great, but I don't need that to encompass my entire life. Like I'm still a human being, so I'm not saying that you got to live, breathe, die, fight the power, but you do have to have some things ingrained in the way that you move about your day, period, to understand that the work never stops. So we just got to find that balance.
And for you, I want somebody who knows that women can have babies.
Oh, okay.
Only women can have babies. I just want to let you know that.
Interesting. There are other people who can have babies.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if they have a uterus, they can have babies. But they just might not identify as women.
Okay.
Those are two different things. Like you can be biologically female, but you can't be biologically woman. Because woman is a gender construct. A social construct. But if you got a uterus, yeah, you can have a baby.
Yes, that's the point. If you have a uterus, you can have a baby.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we agree on that.
Now, this conversation that I want to have with you is not just about the clip we just saw about Jess. It's about fear, identity, who gets to claim womanhood in public. Now, for the record, I'm not here to suggest canceling Jess Hilarious. I'm not even coming for Jess Hilarious. Okay, I might be coming for Jess Hilarious. I'm here to unpack the fear behind her fire, because transphobia is not always loud hate. Sometimes it is quiet insecurity. So let's talk about what's feeding all of this transphobia from Jess Hilarious. On the surface, Jess, not hilarious, as people call her, is transphobic and homophobic. Let's just put it out there. Yes, but it's easy to stop there and call that out. But I want to explore how her transphobia is situated, especially in the context of her defending various identities that she holds. Her social positioning, a Black woman, a mother, a dark-skinned Black woman, a dark-skinned cisgender Black woman, a dark-skinned cisgender Black woman who has been pegged as being trans, likely by Black men who identify as cisgender and straight. And not only various insecurities that Jess Hilarious might have, but various embodied insecurities. I'm trying to unpack this with care and precision, although I sit inside of some of the identities that she be coming for. But before I begin, who can tell me what percentage of an iceberg is above water? And why is the answer roughly 10% of the iceberg that we see is above water? So that means that there is 90% that we can't see. Insert what took the damn Titanic clean up out of here. So first I want to stay on the surface, the 10% that we can see. And that's what most people are talking about. So let's talk about some of the stuff that you may have heard. First, we got transphobia as identity and as a defense mechanism with Jess Hilarious. Now, Jess has admitted out of her own deep-voiced mouth that people often mistake her as a trans woman, the very group of people that she stay coming for. Now, this is something that I feel like she carries as a wound and a social insult. And coming from the hood full of Black people, it is insulting. You might call it internalized transphobia if you want to, but it is insulting for a cisgender woman to be pegged as being trans. Now let's pause here. I need to be very clear. The people who often mistake Jess Hilarious for a trans woman that result in the wound that she always coming at trans people with are Black men. And they're cisgender Black men who outwardly probably identify as straight. And the Black men who mistake her for a trans woman, those Black men, many of them shoot their shot at her. They are also trans attracted Black men. And that in the hood is a conundrum. So she getting these messages that the very people that she is attracted to, cisgender Black men who identify as straight, some of them are shooting their shot at her because they think she is trans, meaning they are trans attracted. That means something. That means something huge within Black dating culture. So when Jess Hilarious says only women can birth babies, it's less about biological accuracy. And it's more about her asserting her own legitimacy as a real woman, which she has used the term real woman many times. She also uses the term female. So here we are. So in my mind, this is not just about transphobia. This is insecurity encoded gender policing. It's like she's saying, I'm constantly made to feel not woman enough. So I'm gonna double down on the most exclusionary definition of womanhood possible in order to assert my value. I ain't saying it's excusable, but it is legible. Her transphobia is her armor, but unfortunately it's also her megaphone because she stay talking. Transphobia as armor and also as her megaphone. Then we got the second thing I didn't come up with is primacy and recency bias in her own identity formation. But first we got to define primacy and recency. So the primacy and the recency effects, they're these cognitive biases that impact like how people remember information presented in a list or a sequence. The primacy effect refers to the tendency to recall items presented at the beginning of a list better than the items presented at the middle or the end of a list. And they say that you remember the items presented at the beginning because the initial items have more time to be rehearsed and transferred to your long-term memory, and that makes it more likely that you can recall those items. Now, the recency effect refers to the tendency to recall items presented at the end of a list better than those presented at the middle or the beginning. And that is because it is believed that these items are still active in your short-term memory while the recall task is performed. Now, what the hell has got to do with Jess Hilarious? I think it got a lot to do with Jess Hilarious. So when we talk about primacy, Jess's primary social identity is being a dark-skinned, cisgender, black girl from Baltimore with a deep-ass voice. All of this includes a cultural background that likely centers, like for most of us, hyperfemininity and the traditional ideals of womanhood. So these ideals were instilled early or primary, and them motherfuckers is hard to uproot. So in other words, these experiences are items presented at the beginning of a list, and that list is Jess's life. Then we got recency, because primacy and recency is an effect that go together when it comes to cognitive bias. Her recent experiences, more recent than that of childhood, is motherhood, postpartum, being perceived as potentially trans by cisgender men who outwardly identify as straight, but clearly ain't straight if they trans attracted. Anyway, these experiences reignite the old insecurities or anxieties from the past. So these experiences might be newer, motherhood, postpartum, being an adult, they might be newer. So when we talk about the recency effect, she got a tendency to recall these experiences or items in a list presented more recently in her life better or quicker because they're active in her short-term memory. She just had a baby versus the long-term memory. She ain't been a mama as long as she's been a dark-skinned black girl. So it's like she's saying, I'm used to y'all calling me these dark-skinned insults, but y'all keep calling me a man. So let me shout my real womanhood loud enough to drown out the insults of you calling me a man. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what y'all say about the way in which the hood frames perspectives. Being called a trans woman in the hood, in most people's minds, is akin to being called a man. So she's saying, y'all keep calling me a man. So let me shout my real womanhood loud enough to drown out the insult of being called a fucking man. And I'm going to hook it on to something I've proven recently. I can have babies. This is the primacy and recency effect within Jess's identity formation. So she's stuck between what has always defined her and what recently threatened her. And trans people, to be quite honest with you, we just became collateral in her struggle. We are collateral. It's not necessarily that she's thinking extremely deep about it. She is just trying to get that shit up off of her. And trans people are collateral. And I'm also going to extend that to say, just like most people in this trans conversation and insulting trans people, is only thinking about trans women. Chicks with dicks, chicks in men in dresses. I don't know if Jess is as much. She may lie and say she is, but I would call that cap. I don't think she think about trans men. Most people ain't. Then to still stay in the 10% of the iceberg, gender anxiety and this fragile ass ownership of womanhood that many cisgender women experience. So Jess's repeated digs into trans identity, they actually reflect a very common belief that womanhood is a finite resource and it's limited, and that trans women, in her opinion, are encroaching on that limited resource. They're intruding on the territory of womanhood, a thing that she considers to be a right that is only afforded to people who can birth babies. And she has proven to you that she can birth babies. To hell with the fact that many cisgender women can't birth babies. Facts never matter when it comes to the phobias. Now, this is where the birth-giving argument shows up as Jess's holy grail. You can't take this from me. I birthed life. That makes me real. A real woman, which we probably can find clips of her saying real woman. If somebody say female, they say real woman, or biological female, or biological woman. Personally, I identify as female, but I don't use the term of female. But I identify as female because my gender is not that of woman, but I want to acknowledge that I am female. But the issue with Jess's framing in this is that that's not the only way to be a woman. And it positions infertile cis women as less valid. Her own sister, people she calls friend. She probably has women, if she's a black woman from Baltimore, she has women in her life who probably struggle conceiving and birthing. But her biases don't care about that. And it ignores trans men and non-binary people who give birth. But like I said, I don't think Jess is thinking about trans men. And I don't think she thinks about non-binary people. Jess's mindset is very binary. So I think she made, non-binary people, but she probably couldn't tell you what the fuck a non-binary person was for real. And it relies on the same biological essentialism that oppresses every marginalized gender, including her. The phobias backfire on all of y'all, FYI. But to her, it feels like a line in the sand. She thinks she's protecting something, womanhood, which she feels she's a part of because she can birth babies. But what she's really doing is projecting her fear of being erased. That's my take. And this one might piss her off and some of the people who value her. Anti-intellectualism and platform power. Let's be honest. Jess is not known for her intellectual rigor. So when she's on a platform like the Breakfast Club, which is already wrought with troubled history of transphobic content, clumsy ass political discourse, Jess Hilarious feels emboldened to bump her fucking gums and speak without nuance because of her platform positioning and her anti-intellectual rigor. But there's some fucking danger with this because there's millions of people exposed to her voice and her statements. And no matter how uninformed we may feel that Jess Hilarious is, that shit gets amplified more than the truth. If we notice, Jess stayed and Lauren, who spit more educated, substantiated facts, is gone. I just want to know who's going to tell Jess Hilarious this piece. Sis, if your man is homophobic or transphobic towards queer and trans people, there is a 100% chance that he either will be or is already misogynistic towards you. You can't have one without the other. The dehumanization of trans people is the same thread used to weave the cloak of misogyny. Your liberation is intrinsically dependent upon ours. So as long as that man transphobic and queerphobic, you could bet your bottom line he's oppressive in his mindset towards you. Dear Jess Hilarious, your desire for a transphobic man is only gonna guarantee your own demise. But I'm not sure them types of connections are connecting for you. Now I'm also thinking what she thinks she doing versus what she actually doing. Because those are not the same. Although in her mind, she thinks that they are the same. Because I really think Jess Hilarious sees herself as keeping it real, which was part of Just the Mess's intro slogan. Speaking for real women, she sees herself as defending biological facts. And she might even say she's defending what God created. But what she's actually doing is reinforcing cis-normative violence, aka her own violence towards herself. She's making trans people feel less safe. I don't know if she give a fuck about trans safety. And she's weaponizing her own hurt as a justification for harming other people. I could imagine her sitting across from a trans woman and the trans woman elevating very valid points and her saying something like, I've been hurt too. I experienced violence too. So you're weaponizing your own hurt as a justification for harming other people? So what's she doing versus what she thinks she's doing? It's basically a classic case of hurt people. So basically with Jess, with the 10% of the iceberg, it's basically defensiveness from being misgendered her damn self. The first time Jess Hilarious said she had been thought of by men as a trans person, I was like, oh, well, this explains so much. Then she got this deep insecurity around womanhood. Because when you are thought of as a trans woman by cisgender men, that creates automatically an insecurity around your own womanhood. Then you got the bioessentialist frameworks that we are all taught early and revalidated through motherhood, that because I'm a mother, because I can birth babies, I am biologically a real woman, which, as Lene told us, there's no such thing as a biological woman. There's biological female, but woman is a gender and social construct. Then recency bias due to her public speculation on her gender. Then we got the anti-intellectual bravado that Jess brazenly and proudly almost walks with, that masks her fragile identity. Because, yeah. And then she got this platform, these multiple platforms, starting off with Just with the Mess on Instagram and TikTok. Then she became a co-host of The Breakfast Club with Angela Yee left. And these platforms reward sound bites, not facts. They reward speculations and stereotypes, not sensitivity toward marginalized communities. Although everybody on The Breakfast Club is black. It's so crazy. So then we got the 90% that is below the surface of the water. And this is some of the stuff that I'm not hearing. Like more systems level questions, not just what is it, but what is feeding what? What are the inputs to result in these seemingly random homophobic and transphobic outbursts from Jess Hilarious? What are the reinforcements? What are the loops that make this transphobia not only present, but strategically useful to Jess's identity and her public persona? Transphobia sells. Homophobia is lucrative. So when we talk about the loops and the reinforcements, the first, what is feeding what, is the misgendering is feeding her being misgendered, when people think she's trans, that's a misgendering, is feeding her insecurity. And that's feeding the biological essentialism argument. That's feeding the transphobia. That's feeding the external validation. And that's feeding the reinforced insecurity. So first is she's misgendered or read as trans. That creates this internal discomfort or a threat to her identity as a woman. Then that insecurity pushes her toward the most biologically rooted form of validation she can find. I gave birth. Y'all can't take shit from me. Women give birth. I did it. Which makes me wonder what argument she would use if she was a cisgender woman who couldn't have babies. I don't know. But then that leads to this like reactive bio-essentialism. Only real women can give birth. Then that becomes transphobia. But it's cloaked in this protecting womanhood thing. So she gets a pass by people who don't have an ear to hear transphobia. Because if you hear her and she seems to be protecting womanhood, you might miss the fact that that shit is rooted in transphobia. Because the transphobia came first, but it's cloaked in protecting womanhood. I'm not transphobic. I'm just protecting womanhood. There's such thing as real women. I want you to have a man who knows that women have babies. Then we go from protecting womanhood to the public, or at least her audience. They validate this shit. They validate her defensiveness. They clap, they laugh, they agree. If you listen to when she said that shit to Lene Vinay, you can hear Charlamagne chuckling in the video from the other day.
And for you, I want somebody who knows that women can have babies.
Oh, okay.
Only women can have babies. I just want to let you know that.
Interesting. There are other people who can have babies.
Okay.
Not challenging her, because I've heard Charlamagne cut an interview through the air and challenge somebody. We thought Charlamagne was growing for a little while. But on this situation, he chuckles, and that external affirmation, that soothes her wound temporarily. She didn't get challenged. Somebody chuckled, and her wound got soothed of the past of being thought that she was trans. And like, let's be clear. Jess Hilarious is dark-skinned from Baltimore with really Afro features. She grew up, was she 30-something? So she grew up maybe in the 90s, the 2000s, when these big noses and big lips was not in style yet. She got some trauma. And so when someone chuckles, when she says, I just want you to have a man, then you cloaking it like you give a fuck about Lene's dating life. I just want you to have a man that know that women make babies, that only women can have babies. But the external validation that soothes that wound is temporary. It never heals it. So the loop starts again next time she feels misread. And we could see Jess has loops over and over, like roughly every fucking 4 months. This is a recursive defense mechanism masquerading as truth-telling, because in Jess's mind, she keeps it real. Then we got platform visibility feeding into controversy, feeding into the engagement, and feeding into this reinforced platforms. Her platforms thrive on mess. Her IG and TikTok platform was called Jess with the Mess. Then she owned a Breakfast Club, which keeps up mess. Then the transphobic comments generate controversy. Transphobia sells, which means engagement, which means relevance. Then she receives praise. You see how these things loop back? Then the praise is not just because she's supposedly funny. But she got people in the comments bucking her up, talking about, you keep it real, suggesting bravery, being brave and brave enough to say what everybody else is scared to say. Girl, you say the shit we all thinking, but we just don't have a platform you got. So then her identity becomes hooked to a public facing role of a gender cop. And it rewards her most harmful takes. These things have reinforcements and they have loops, and we have to be masterful at being able to hear it. Because if you listening from a wound of needing your womanhood protected, you're going to think Jess Hilarious is on your side. Because you're listening from a wound instead of a scar. You're going to think she's on your side. Then another loop is the inherited gender roles feed into Black motherhood ideals, feed into the fear of replacement. She showed cried on that, the one with Lauren when she thought she about to lose her fucking job. That feeds into police and trans women. So you got Jess Hilarious growing up steeped in Baltimore rigid Black gender norms, especially around what it means to be a good woman. Strong, nurturing, mothering, enduring. That feeds into her performance of womanhood through birth, through motherhood, through a little sassiness. It's not just personal. I need us to understand that this is culturally inherited and socially rewarded. This is not one individual said, you know, Jess, womanhood is performed through birth. One person told her that. No, ma'am, Pam. This is cultural, groupthink, bigger than her, born into it. You don't know it's a chair. You didn't make up that what you sit in is a chair. Somebody told you that was a chair and somebody told them. Cultural, inherited, socially rewarded. Then that feeds into the idea, but if trans women, and this is the part people ain't talking about, if trans women are allowed to equally claim the title of woman, what happens to the currency of her struggle? If trans women are allowed to equally claim the title of woman, what happens to the currency of Jess's struggle? Thus, the capital she gains as a woman. Because womanhood, to many Black people, equals struggle. So then Jess begins to guard womanhood like property, as if expanding womanhood to include trans women inherently diminishes her. This is scarcity logic applied to identity, and is rooted in generations of being told that womanhood equals pain and pain equals worth. This is the shit people ain't talking about. We just like, oh, Jess canceled Jess not that smart. But Jess is well groomed into a society, into a Black culture that says all these things. If I let trans women into this womanhood thing to equally claim the title of woman, what happens to my currency as a woman, specifically around struggle? So I'm gonna guard womanhood like it's property, baby. And I'm gonna believe, I'm never gonna say it, that expanding womanhood to include trans women diminishes me as a woman. Scarcity logic applied to my identity is generational. We are told long suffering, which is a term I can't stand. I'm not interested in suffering long, okay? As somebody who is very well versed and doused in girlhood, you can keep that long suffering shit. Then another loop we have is Jess has a particular humor style that is popular in Blackness. That feeds into, I'm gonna say it, the bully ass archetype. That feeds into the need for target. That feeds into transphobia as a punchline. Not target the store we're boycotting. A target, meaning trans people. So we got Jess has always leaned into roasting comedy. So roasting comedy is popular. That's Black comedy. I'm a clown you. I'm a joan you. I'm a roast you. She's always leaned into roast comedy. She roasts herself. Back when she didn't have edges and shit, she said, I'm gonna get to me before you get to me. And roast comedy is where ridicule and exaggeration are currency. You exaggerate and you come for. Then that feeds into this kind of comedy that requires a target. And in her world, trans people have become the acceptable punching bag. Queerness has always been the acceptable punching bag in Blackness when it comes to roasting. Lyrics, hip hop, comedy. She inherited this shit. She knew it was permissible. She knew it was acceptable. And in her world, she's allowed what she was handed down, which is that trans people are an acceptable punching bag. So her identity as a funny girl from the hood who say what she want demands edge. So transphobia and homophobia become reliable go-to for laughs and keeping it real points. Now, this is where she fucks up. because she mistakes that shit for authenticity, when really that shit is cruelty. So this is comedic identity feeding social violence under the guise of it's just jokes. She inherited this shit. This was handed down to her. She was plopped down out of her mama coochie or stomach, depending on if she was a C-section, into a society that said trans people are okay, attack them in your jokes. It's comedic. Social violence doesn't matter if they're the target. It's just jokes. So the core of this is, Jess is 33, so she's beginning to get, and she a mama of 2 kids, and I think they got 2 different fathers. Sis is beginning to fear being erased or illegible, washed. Illegible as a woman, illegible as beautiful, illegible as normal, illegible as powerful unless she diminishes somebody else. So her transphobia is not just Jess is ignorant. It's a strategy of legibility and survival. Jess probably will do a lot of things to survive and not being that broke black girl again. You know how many of us from the hood, I'd be damned if I be broke again? That's why they struggling finding these last 2 boys who done broke out from this New Orleans jail on Tulane and Broad. Them niggas ain't going back. I'm not going back. Not going back to poverty. Not going back to jail. I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I have to do to stay out, to stay paid. If that means some of y'all trans motherfuckers gotta be collateral, so fucking be it. I might be wrong about these 2 boys. I think they might have caught one of them. But that 27, I'm off topic, but that 27-year-old who got 4 bodies and 2 life sentences, baby, he's going out like Cleo before he let his ass go back. Angola? He said, let me break out of OPP, Orleans Parish. He was in jail, and the jail is on Tulane and Broad. Anyway, he said, let me try to break out of this motherfucker before, because Angola is probably way harder to break out of. That boy is 27. 4 bodies on him. 2 life sentences, which makes me wonder, why was he in jail? I don't know. But my whole point of that is that some people ain't going back. And some people gonna come hella high water, do whatever the fuck they gotta do not to go back. And Jess reminds me, no judgment, because I understand I want to go back to poverty. And I want to go back to not being able to afford whatever the fuck you use to keep these edges coming in. You got 2 kids now, you have had lifestyle creep. But what I am saying is that I also don't expect you not to use trans people as punching bags to avoid going back. But I want us to be clear, some of us ain't going back. And if you expect people to become all morally sound and educating themselves, and why the fuck would I, not me, her, educate myself on trans shit when I see how big of my checks become when I bash trans people? I'm not fucking going back. I'm not going back to the streets of Baltimore as the same poor girl that's dark skinned with a big nose and big lips, that is not necessarily the ones that these niggas is chasing after, and the ones that are chasing after me also tranny chasers. She's not going back. She's not. Her transphobia is not just ignorance. It is a strategy of legibility and survival, cloaked in humor and controversy, and biological essentialism. And the worst part is that it works. Her platform grows. Her ego is soothed. Her audience feels seen in their own gender biases and fears. And her paycheck does not suffer, because transphobia sells. Homophobia is lucrative. But she trades harm for attention. And she exchanges expansion for exclusion. And she builds her own voice by suppressing other people. And that's what it is. And baby, guess what? I don't expect no less. But I'm also not done. I want to push this further, deeper into the iceberg, deeper into the 90% that's under the water. Because this cursory view of Jess Hilarious is way deeper than that. Let's push this further. Outside of the obvious psychological defenses and the hoops and the loops that I was talking about, I want to explore some of these less visible directions. Ancestral, economic, spiritual, political, and cultural in origin. So first one is ancestral scarcity and femininity as inheritance. I'm gonna explain what that means. Transphobia as a defense of inherited suffering. So I talked a little bit about how womanhood, black womanhood generally is around suffering, long suffering child. But many black cis women were raised with the unspoken rule that womanhood equals endurance. Womanhood does not equal rest. Womanhood does not equal pleasure. They got a lot of black women who have multiple children, ain't never had one fucking orgasm. Womanhood equals endurance. Long suffering, not sprints, long running, distance running. Inherited suffering. You earn womanhood through suffering, especially through childbirth, especially through abandonment by men, by your mothers. You earn womanhood through disrespect. You earn womanhood by holding down the house. So when somebody is perceived as skipping the suffering but claiming the title, that feels like theft. And that's what Jess feels like trans women are doing. It's kind of like, not really, but I don't know if y'all remember when reality TV, like the Real Housewives of Atlanta and shit first popped off, and I think Samuel L. Jackson was heated. He felt like these people are bypassing the suffering of the grunt work of being a thespian and shooting their asses straight through Mona, Scott, Young, and Bravo. And he used Nene Leakes as an example and going straight to the top. When I have put in my life on stages, behind stages, was broke, an actor, went to Morehouse, and you mean tell me that these fake ass reality stars are making what I make or more and didn't suffer at all? He felt like they were skipping the suffering but claiming the title of being actors. It felt like theft to him. That is how cisgender women feel about trans women. I'm gonna just put that shit out there. They feel that they are skipping the suffering, the cramps, the birthing, the girlhood, the rejection by men, the disrespect by men, the abandonment, the childbirth. You skipping the suffering, but you won't claim the title of woman. That's what Jess Hilarious is also fucking mad about. Even if she don't put it in that words, that shit is still in her. So Jess and many people like her, I ain't saying it's rational. I'm saying it's real. Because if you live in the world I live in, we could sugarcoat this shit and operate according to white norms around these conversations. But girl, Jess and many people like her, subconsciously or consciously, believe my femininity was paid for. If you didn't suffer like I did, how the fuck can you wear the same crown? I paid for this through suffering, through years, through birth, my child's birth. This is what I would call ancestral grief misdirected and like projected onto trans people instead of the systems that created the grief in the first place. Because y'all never come for the systems. Y'all always come for the individuals who are also oppressed by the systems. Another one we're not talking about is black respectability politics that feeds into internalized gender policing. Jess is saying, and many women who co-sign her, you know, some of these niggas that co-sign her too. We don't want to talk about it, but what she's saying is that if we let gender be fluid instead of rigid and static, we'll lose more power than we already fucking have. We already ain't got no power. So there's this buried logic that says niggas is already marginalized and systematized. We already got to present ourselves as clear and ordered and defined to gain access. Just as like I already had to stroke enough egos and enough dicks maybe. I'm not going to say I ain't going to put that on her. In order to gain access to the little bit of shit I got. And you want me to let these chicks with dicks in who have man privilege in some areas? You want me to legitimately look at them as a woman. And I didn't have to be already marginalized as black, marginalized as a cisgender woman, present myself as clear and ordered and defined to gain access to this little bit of shit I got. And you want me to just say trans women are women. Do you know what the fuck I've had to endure? Now there's some validity to that. Whiteness wants us to say just willy-nilly. And I'm saying this as a fucking trans masculine identified person. Whiteness wants us to just almost blindly walk through the world and say trans women are women without the contextualized reality of black experiences. So some cis black women feel a need to enforce very strict gender roles as a form of respectability and protection, even if those roles harm them too. I would not be surprised if Jess Hilarious can identify ways in which her own beliefs probably harm her too. But the cost benefit is probably, if she did a cost, analysis, she would probably say it's worth what she loses to maintain the transphobic beliefs. I'm not saying I agree with her, but she may not realize it, but her transphobia is co-signed by, she wouldn't probably use this term, this is more of a Toni Morrison thing, the internalized white gaze. It says if I look, which is what Toni Morrison decentered in her writing, The White Gaze. But Jess's unspoken belief is that if I look and act like the right kind of woman, maybe I'll be safe. And so I'm always interested in framing these types of things around safety and survival, because we need to humanize Black women more. I have so many issues with Jess Hilarious, but I also know a lot of Jess Hilariouses. I also grew up in very similar worlds as Jess Hilarious. And I know a lot of it boils down to safety and survival. And safety and survival, because they're so fragile in the hood and for Black women and often Black men, I'm gonna admit it. When something like safety and survival is so fragile, there are many things that are threats that are sometimes illogical. A threat doesn't have to be logical when it's about safety and survival, the fragility of safety and survival. This is why I'm gonna always say your issue needs to be with the systems and structures and not the people burdened by the systems and structures. This is colonial gender structure feeding performative identity. We are all doing gender. Gender is a fucking verb. You don't have a gender, my friend. You do it. You do gender, you perform gender, you take it on, you take it off, you choose how you want to decorate yourself according to gender. For those of you who still think that gender is a noun, something that you have that is static, I offer you to reframe your thinking of gender as a verb. It is something you do. Cisgender women, you perform gender too. And so if Jess Hilarious is saying subconsciously, if I look and act like the right kind of woman, which she has defined according to toxic ass ideals, which is I gave birth, I'll be safe. If they out here thinking I'm a trans woman, she's not blind to the violence that trans women experience. If I am perceived as a trans woman, my safety is at risk. So if I look and act like the right kind of woman, maybe I'll stay safe. When is the last time you've seen a trans woman who was a stud? Trans women are operating by rules defined by cisness. One of the biggest things for many trans women is to pass. That is around safety. Is this making sense? It's why y'all don't get too far with your cis women, with your transphobic beliefs. Because the moment they think you trans, it's a wrap. And there's too many of y'all who looking like you could be trans to have so many transphobic fucking beliefs. Too many of y'all look like you could be trans to have as many transphobic beliefs as you do, dear Jess Hilarious. Your fucked up, unexamined beliefs don't work for you, girl. They think you trans sometimes. You got a voice deeper than most cis women. That is a message. Your transphobic beliefs don't work for you because they think you trans sometimes. Whew. It's gonna be an hour-long video. The next thing I thought about that's more spiritual and ancestral, y'all done heard it a million times. Or maybe you don't have church, child. But it's spiritual confusion that feeds into gender essentialism in Black church culture. Because you can't talk about niggas without talking about church. And you've heard it. God made Adam and Eve, not who? Adam and Steve. So I don't know if Jess is religious. I don't know if Jess goes to church. But I know Jess probably is, as a Black girl from Baltimore, very well versed on church culture. So even non-religious Black people are shaped by Black church gender teachings, especially around things like God's design, what God designed things to be, the sanctity of the womb, the role of the women or the role of the woman. You don't have to go to church every Sunday to have heard and to have it rooted in your mind. God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. You don't have to go to church every Sunday to understand or to have heard things that center God's design and the role of the woman. You know that to see a woman pastor is like, oh. And what I need you to also understand is that's because your baseline is man, pastor. Even biblically, God is referred to as him with a capital H in the Bible. So Jess might not identify as religious whatsoever. I don't need to know what she identifies as religious, but I know she a Black girl from the hood So she's likely raised in a culture shaped by that theology, shaped by Christianity, even if it's by osmosis. So even her jokes are going to carry residues of womb equals woman, period. This means that trans people disrupt her cosmic order. They disrupt her spiritual beliefs, not just her social understandings. So it doesn't fucking matter if she's intellectual. She's brilliant culturally. She got all of these absorbed things swarming around, all of these knowings swarming around in her that she can identify and pick from every day. She don't have to be astute. She doesn't have to know the word hegemony or identity formation to understand hegemony in action and identity formation in action. She knows babies are made by the beings I was taught were women, and anything else don't make babies, because I was only taught that men and women exist. And so trans people completely, just by existing, disrupt her entire cosmic order. And she doesn't probably use the words cosmic order, but she has a cosmic order. Trans people disrupt her spiritual beliefs. Again, I want to be stressing this, not just her social understandings. Then we got online fame economy that feeds into the fear of becoming obsolete. I really think she's of the age, and all them other colliding identities, like being a mother of two by two different men, I think. She's 33. That is the beginning. I know 33 sound young, but 33 with kids and shit is the beginning of the boop, washed boop, boop. She is in a career sector Hollywood. Better when you hit 30, you start getting washed up. So her online fame economy feeding into her fear of becoming obsolete is not far-fetched. She ain't crazy. And she dark-skinned, black with big lips and a big nose with a deep voice, with a thick Baltimore accent. And that feeds into her use of transphobia for relevance. Jess is saying without saying, if I stop being controversial, will they still care? Safety, survival, care. She lives in a digital economy where shock equals engagement. The more shocking shit she say, the bigger her checks probably be. Engagement equals bookings for her, and bookings equal survival. I don't know if Jess is gonna stop being transphobic unless we all form some mutual aid to assure her that she gonna still not have to go back. Not have to go back. As a woman in comedy and radio, she is fearing aging out. She is fearing being replaced or being forgotten. I bet you the forgotten part, although she may not have thought about it, that shit trumps the fear of being replaced. To be forgotten, your mark is not indelible or whatever the word is. They not who. Let's be honest. Who? I don't want to hurt your feelings, Jess, if you ever watch this. But if Jess vanished today, who gonna be talking about Jess Hilarious in 5 years, in 10 years? We might remember her, but who's gonna be paying homage to her? Let me put it like that. Who is going to be looking at her as having legacy? That is why I think her fear of being forgotten trumps this aging out, trumps the being replaced. That girl was broken up with that Lauren situation. I think she felt like Lauren is smarter than her. I think she felt like Lauren, I don't even know, they might be the same age, but I think she felt like Lauren is more young and youthful and vibrant and sprightly than her. I don't think Lauren got no fucking kids. And if she do, she is not looking weathered like Jess Hilarious. Jess is scared of being forgotten. She knows that she does not have a legacy brand. She got a comedic, trendy brand. And trends die. Legacy lives. So when her comedy starts feeling safe, she gonna up the edge because she don't want to be forgotten. And transphobia, again, sadly, is the clickbait that converts. We're collateral, y'all. So if y'all out here brokenhearted trans people, girl, I would offer that you use your energy somewhere else. You are clickbait that converts to a chick. So this isn't just I'm ignorant. It might be, and I think it is. I need to stay in the algorithm. So I'm gonna say the things that nobody else gonna say. I need to stay in the algorithm. So I'm gonna say the things that they won't. Capitalism feeding harm via platform survivalism. Jess is trying to fucking survive. Jess is trying to fucking survive. Then we got personal body trauma feeds into gatekeeping womanhood. I'm going to just go by statistics and assume that Jess has had some type of bodily harm happen to her in some way. I don't know if that's sexual violence. I don't know if that's maternal violence when she delivered 2 babies. But part of what she and other cisgender women might be saying to us that comes out as transphobia, if I've been harmed in this body, it must mean something. If we think suffering is indicative of womanhood, we suffer when we're harmed. So if I've been harmed in this body, it must mean something. If Jess has experienced pregnancy-related trauma, medical racism, I don't understand how she hasn't. She's got 2 kids. She go to the doctor, even when she ain't pregnant properly. Gender-based or body-based violence, postpartum mental health challenges, being a black girl in the world. Not many people escape the hood that are girls or even boys with no violence. Then womanhood has cost her deeply. And she'd be damned if she let a chick with a dick come in and be able to say, I'm a woman. And if she hasn't fully processed that, she might lash out at the idea that someone else can choose this identity without the same pain. I need us to talk about that without being called transphobic. I don't know the statistics on what age most black people transition, most black trans women transition into their womanhood. I may be wrong, but I'm going to say many black trans women have a boyhood. And we are expecting girls from the hood who grew up in sometimes abject poverty to not feel like their womanhood costs them deeply. And if they haven't processed that, lashing out at something that is a threat, again, fragile safety and survival have easy threats, even if it's not logical. And you want them to say that somebody else who can choose the same identity, trans women or women, without the same pain. And whiteness says, yes, that's what I want you to say. That's what I want you to say. Fuck your unprocessed trauma. But that's what it is. Unprocessed trauma feeding this exclusionary validation. And I want to wake one thing the fuck up. That y'all might get mad. Cis drag performance. Dear cisgender black women, I hinted on this earlier. You too are performing womanhood because gender is a performance for everybody. Gender is not a noun, it is a verb. And this might be the most tender idea of the things I've mentioned. What if Jess knows somewhere deep down that she too is performing womanhood? That she too takes it on, takes it off, dresses it up how she wants to dress it up that day? What if Jess knows somewhere deep down, even if she don't have the language for it, that she too is performing womanhood? Her makeup, her body, delivery, even her jokes are crafted to read as woman, as feminine, as maybe a little tomboyish sometimes. Now that's not a flaw. That's how all genders function socially. Performance. We are all performing gender. But she can't hold that idea consciously because that will fuck up all of her schemas. It would mean that she's closer to trans women than she wants to admit. She can't hold that idea that she too is performing womanhood because it would mean that she's closer to trans women in gender performance because trans women get their gender performance from cisness than she wants to admit. So instead, this is what Jess does, and this is what buku fucking cis women do. She insists, I'm real, they're not. I'm a real woman, they're not. That is her way of saying, don't let this mirror talk back. Don't let this mirror, meaning I'm avoiding seeing that I got more in common with trans women around gender performance than I don't, but I don't want to let this mirror talk back. So this is existential performance anxiety. My very existence, existential performance anxiety, feeding the disassociation from the shared truth between her and trans women. It reminds me of when I get down and I sit at a table real good with cisgender women, straight cisgender women who think that I have no capacity to talk about dick. that I have no understanding of heteronormative experiences inside of relationships with men. As if I ain't been fucking niggas since I was willingly fucking niggas since I was 14. As if I don't have probably the same number of bodies of men than women. It reminds me of when I sit at tables and I start astutely having heteronormative conversations experientially with cisgender straight women who think that because I'm a chick with a beard who is queer now at 45, that I'm some type of gold star. That they think that cisgender women need to think and do often think that they are so vastly different from people like me when it comes to sexual identity or sexual orientation and who we fucked. And they think that I don't know a fine ass man when I see one. They think that because I don't want a penis in my vagina, that I cannot have experiential conversations. They think that our sexualities are so vastly different. And it's not a flaw. It's how all genders function socially. But they can't hold the idea that somebody like me is more like them than not, because it would mean that they're closer to somebody like me than they want to admit. That is the same thing that people like Jess Hilarious are experiencing. She can't hold consciously the idea that she is deeply similar to trans women. Because that would mean that when she say I'm real, they not, that shit collapses. It collapses. She don't want to let that mirror talk back to her. Cis drag performance is something most people don't want to talk about. But cis people are in drag every day. Y'all have the most surgeries. Y'all have the most gender affirming surgeries. Y'all have more gender affirming surgeries than trans people. The boob job is the #1 gender affirming surgery in the country. Breast augmentation. I have a whole workshop on Elon that starts with Elon Musk and his gender affirming surgeries. Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey. The globe's #1 location for hair transplants. A GDP of $110 billion annual of people, mostly cisgender men, probably 99.9%, fly to Turkey every year to get a hair transplant because the messages sent to their gender is you need hair on your head. Like, we have this belief, and I'm somebody who lives with alopecia, who is considering going to Turkey for a hair transplant. Men, we assume that men don't mind being bald because we, tell them it's sexy. That's a fucking lie. I'm gonna just talk about black men. Black men's relationship with their hair is not very different than black women's relationship with their hair. Blackness has a particular relationship with hair. And we know that because $110 billion is spent annually. And that don't include flights and hotels and shit. I'm talking about on the surgery for hair transplants, which is a gender affirming procedure. Gynecomastia, which is when men have boobs, that's another high cost gender affirming procedure. There's a split screen of a plane coming from Istanbul and a plane coming from Miami, which is the BBL capital. To drive the point home, I'm probably not going to look for it, that men seek gender affirming surgeries just like women. And the majority of these people are probably cisgender. We have been giving messages around gender for a long time. And if I then begin to say or accept the fact that trans women that I also curate as a cis woman my own gender and perform gender, and that my gender is a performance, just like trans women's, because part of what I root my transphobia in is that trans women is out here performing, faking womanhood. That they out here are putting on womanhood. And if I have to then admit that I also put on womanhood, because gender is a performance for everybody, then that means I'm closer to trans women than I would ever admit. So I'm not going to admit that I perform womanhood. And I'm not going to let myself admit that I'm closer in how I have to maneuver my life to trans women than I want to admit. Because then I can't no longer say they real, I'm real, they're not. I can't say I'm real, they're not. I don't want to let the mirror talk back. Then we got the lure of silence around certain topics. And by this, I mean, nobody in Jess's circle is probably challenging her. And that silence feels like agreement. And so she escalates. I'm not going to conflate that with having a whole bunch of yes men in her circle. I'm just saying that she probably doesn't have a lot of people in her circle that challenge her. That does not mean she got a lot of people agreeing with her. And that silence can feel like agreement. So she escalates in her beliefs and she firmly is more 10 toes down. So if her team, if her audience, if the co-host, if her family don't interrupt this pattern, then her worldview kind of cements and calcifies and she becomes more confident in her ignorance, child. So silence isn't necessarily for her neutrality. It's more like gasoline on the fire. It's more like pedal to the metal. And this is unchecked power feeding her ideology and extremism. Then I don't want y'all to misunderstand this next thing I'm going to say. I'm not saying Jess is attracted to trans women, but there is an element of erotic confusion as threat. So what if the lines between desire, fear, and envy are too blurry for her to admit? Hear me out. So her transphobia might be feeding on unacknowledged erotic confusion. And I don't necessarily mean attraction. I mean the fear that men might desire trans women over cis women. So if you got the fact that she's saying, I have been confused for a trans woman. And if depending on the percentage of, if she got more men coming to her thinking she's trans than not, she might fear that men desire trans women over cis women. And the shame that she herself might admire or even be attracted to a trans woman's power or her beauty or her clarity, that does not mean that she is trans attracted and want to fuck trans women. So don't conflate the two. Like, hear what I'm saying and not what I'm not saying. She might have shame that she feels an admiration for trans women. Because at the same time as all this stuff I was saying that seemed like I'm defending Jess Hilarious, which I'm not, there is also this piece that might not be clicking, that she might admire the boldness of a man. I'm not saying trans women are men. I'm talking in hood terms. That a chick with a dick can walk through the world adorned as a woman. She might admire some of that courage and that power and be attracted to because again, I don't think she thinks about trans men. She might even be attracted to a trans woman's power and bravery and beauty and clarity on who they are as a trans woman. I would not be surprised if Jess Hilarious didn't really know who she was. For real, for real. So I'm not saying that she's attracted to trans women and that she want to fuck them, because a lot of y'all can't even think about sexuality and attraction and appreciation outside of wanting to fuck. That's why y'all think that Oprah and Gayle fuck you. Jesus. Don't conflate it. But this may induce a panic that her own femininity might feel outdone. That her own real femininity, real womanhood might be outdone if she can find a smidgen of appreciation for a chick with a dick. At the end of the day, it is not easy walking through this world as a chick with a dick. And somewhere in the brains of even the most homophobic and transphobic cis woman is an appreciation for courage. An appreciation for conceding the ticket, the golden ticket of masculinity and manhood in exchange for the crinkled and the dirty ticket of oppression around womanhood, structurally. Even the most homophobic and transphobic cis woman values courage. And what if Jess feels like the men's desire for trans women, men desire trans women over cis women, depending on the ratio of how many men are trying to holler at her. The shame that she herself might admire trans women, their power, their beauty, their clarity on who they are, because she might not fucking know who she is. And a panic that her own femininity might feel outdone. This will create an internal crisis for anybody. And if you ain't sure of who you are, you might try to fix that crisis by shouting to the rooftops in so many different ways. I'm real. I'm the origin. I'm the only. And you may root that in, I have babies. Women have babies, which is why you may say shit out of the blue. Lene was talking about how she wants a man who is somewhat of a thinker. And Jess Hilarious came out of left field talking about what I want for you is a man who knows that only women can have babies. Nigga, walk me slow on how that connected with that. This is desire and envy feeding rejection. She got to distance herself from trans women in order to suppress the parts of herself that feel unworthy or worst, turned on by a trans woman's courage. I am not saying she is attracted to trans women and want to fuck them. I don't even need to. There's too many other ways to analyze this than flattening it to that. Then we got this concept that I learned from Maria Lugones, and it's called Colonial Gender Operating System, CGOS. And it challenges this assumption that gender is natural and universal and just a given. And it suggests that European colonial practices have imposed and shaped gender systems and norms and shaped and imposed them onto colonized societies, often at the expense of pre-existing gender systems. So in other words, gender has been historically and socially constructed through colonial processes. In other words, Jess Hilarious is operating from a gender binary that was never hers to begin with. Most of us, if you operate according to biological essentialism and according to a very rigid gender binary, especially if you black, honey, you are operating according to a gender system that was never yours to begin with. Your people had a robust and complex gender system that was far more than just two choices. So Jess has taken pages from the social construct we are all handed at birth as newborns, and she's spewing them shits unexamined, uninterrogated, and worse, from her wounds, not from her scar tissue, from her existing gaping wounds. Jess Hilarious, and most of us, all of us, was raised up under this colonial gender operating system. And it says a couple of things. Gender is fixed, and it's assigned by God or science. Your president, first 48 hours in office. First thing he was worried about, the first 3 executive orders, the first couple ones, was about gender and biological essentialism. Didn't he have that picture of all the girls, the sports girls? Listen, gender essentialism is a real thing in people's minds. It also says womanhood is defined by wombs, womb, uterus, and that gender nonconformity is a threat to the gender social order. There's no space for gender nonconformity because the gender binary is so fucking fragile that if we let anything that expands it, the whole shit collapses. Again, the fragile shit, the threats are plentiful and they don't have to make sense. The gender binary, patriarchy, racism, all of the shits are fragile. That's why the threats don't make sense. But this system replaced older ways of knowing. That's why I said Jess's innate systems are far more robust. The older ways of knowing, many indigenous and African cosmologies held multiple genders, fluid identities, and power outside of the binary. So the fucked up part is that Jess isn't just transphobic. She is colonially trained, like most of us. Baby, you trained by the colonizer. And this is the thing we don't be wanting to talk about. Yes, racism. Yes, racism. But the OG oppressive system is gender. Gender is the OG oppressor. Yes, racism. Yes, racism. But baby, when you start researching that thing, gender is the OG. So Jess is not just transphobic, not just homophobic. She is colonially trained. Again, you know a chair is a chair because somebody told you it's a chair. You was born into a world that said it's a chair. Jess didn't make up all these fucking rules. She was born into a world where the rules already existed. And this next one is one that plenty of us fall victim to. If I'm not a woman, then who or what am I? So many people have no self-concept outside of their assigned role as a woman. If you take away their role of mother, sister, auntie, daughter, wife, a lot of women will be stateless as fuck. Roaming, confused, purposeless. To me, it sounds like if Jess loses her grip on her gender identity even slightly, she fears total collapse of her family role, of her motherhood, of her desirability, of her career branding. So she believes she needs a clear and uncontested gender anchor just to function. So every time she sees somebody unmoored and still thriving, like many of trans people are, unmoored, thriving, bopping, line dancing, that destabilizes her. Again, she might not have this language. But when she sees, which goes back to her not wanting to admit that she values the courage of trans women walking through the world as trans women, because let me be clear about Black trans women. This is why y'all get on my nerves trying to say T.S. Madison is trying to pretend to be a woman. How many times T.S. Madison got to say, I'm trans, I'm a trans woman, I'm not female, I'm a trans woman, I was born as male? How many times? Y'all just need T.S. Madison to be trying to pretend that she was born assigned female at birth. But T.S. Madison says, and most Black women I know, most Black trans women I know identify and ride hard for the fact that they are trans women. Not them white ones. That's the ones y'all really mad at. Them white trans women, they the ones that want to not talk about the fact that they was assigned male at birth. But Black trans women, by and large, ain't out here tricking men. And they are very clear that they were assigned male at birth, that they are trans women, and that they are not female. So every time she sees somebody unapologetically unmoored, identifying as a trans woman, not a cis woman, and still thriving, that destabilizes her entire shit. Then we have hypervisibility and limited literacy. This kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Jess Hilarious, she got the microphone, but she do not have the map. she do not have the map. She is hypervisible. We hear her ass all the fucking time. But she is not deeply literate in things like queer theory. Not even in the sense of, I don't call it queer theory, but I'm astute in it. No. She's not even deeply literate in experiential notion. Queer theory. She's not very literate in gender expansiveness, because if I expand and make space for you, what does that mean for my womanhood? And she definitely is not well versed in intersectional power. So her platform, plural, outpace her wisdom every time. The culture that she allows herself to be found in does not require her to catch up at all. In fact, her ignorance is profitable. I bet you she's making some money off of these past couple of days. This is uninformed power feeding boldness without boundaries. Uninformed. Feeding her boldness. And she don't have no fucking boundaries because she don't need to. Because ain't nobody checking her. And the more transphobic she is, the bigger her checks become. And guess what? The audience is in on it. She is not alone. She's almost in an echo chamber, and she's echoing the room. Jess's comments do not live in a vacuum. They feed on like a silent agreement from the parts of her audience who feel their own gender identity slipping, who are tired of being politically correct, and who confuse visibility for erasure. The less visible I am, the more erased I am. She is saying what others are thinking and won't say out loud. That is why she is the keep it real girl. And this makes Jess Hilarious feel like a folk hero, not a villain. It's community avoidance feeding her bigoted expression. She is not talking things that people don't agree with. Go into the comment section. Then we have, just like many people mistake proximity for authority. I'm around queer people, that means I understand it. I have queer friends, so I can say facts. And Jess likely has queer friends, or at least she thinks she does, because I'm wondering who the fuck would be your friend that's queer with your level of transphobia. And she may have even said, I'm not transphobic, I know trans people. But proximity is not literacy, dear Jess. Being adjacent doesn't mean you've interrogated your worldview. It doesn't mean you've dismantled your own internalized binaries. This is false closeness feeding false confidence. Just because you got queer friends, which again, I don't see how, don't mean that you get to be transphobic. And just because you have queer friends doesn't mean you cannot be transphobic, which is typically what y'all be trying to say. I got queer friends. I'm not queer phobic. This false closeness, feeding this false confidence is some bullshit. You mistake proximity for authority. You think because you're around queerness, which you probably are in Hollywood, that means you understand queerness. You do not. You do not. Then we have marketable misunderstanding. Jess Hilarious benefits from staying just confused enough. And she played that shit so good. If Jess Hilarious was to truly educate herself on gender, if she was to truly understand gender, and I think she knows this on some level, that's why she let herself stay just ignorant enough, she would lose access to that whole persona of being the hood chick truth teller role she got going on, that people like, you keep it real. You keep it real. The more homophobic and transphobic she get, the more she becomes the hood chick truth teller. She would lose access to all of that. Because the more she become educated, the less that shit gonna come out her mouth. Because you can't hold all of that together. She would lose access to the ability to say what other people won't say. You say the things that everybody thinking, but don't nobody say. She gonna lose access to all of that when she start reading the Audre Lordes and the Toni Morrisons and even current people. Because when you start learning, you can't keep holding that homophobic shit. And this is another one that I think she would lose access to that's more universal around gender and race. She benefit from this every woman brand. And what I mean by the every woman brand is we see the every woman brand everywhere. It's this brand that refers to, it's like a branding archetype. It embodies the qualities of being relatable and approachable and grounded. And it's often synonymous with the every man or the every person archetype. It's like the regular person who is dependable and humble and seeks connection and belonging. And we see it in brands and public figures. They align with these archetypes. And that is an aim to resonate with a broader audience by emphasizing like the shared human experience. We've seen it within the context of like public personas. They adopt this every woman brand, and it means presenting yourself as somebody who's authentic and down to earth. And just think of the girl next door. I don't necessarily see her because sometimes I see the girl next door as like a white thing, but just as the girl next door as being accessible, as approaching and fostering like this sense of trust and relatability with her audience. Like her audience know that she always gonna come and keep it real, even if it's just with the mess. But it's important to note that while the every woman brand emphasizes this fake inclusivity and this relatability shit, it inadvertently leads to the exclusion of people who don't fit traditional norms. And Jess has to uphold herself to certain traditional norms, this cisgender, this heterosexual, this motherhood shit. Because if she opts out of that, then she becomes excluded from this archetype. So if we're discussing gender identity and like this strict adherence to conventional definitions of womanhood, this shit automatically marginalizes trans people. But if Jess wants to be in the club, that means that she has to marginalize trans people if she wants to be part of this archetype. So this every woman brand, it might be about being relatable and keeping it real and fostering a sense of community and like sisterhood. But when you apply it thoughtfully, it might create strong bonds with a wider audience, but you gotta be aware of that shit because it's gonna inherently push people to the margins. And in order for you to stay with the cool kids, you too gonna have to push people to the margins. So she plays it real smooth. She stays in the sweet spot of intentionally, partially understanding. She stayed just dumb enough on purpose. And a lot of y'all followers who like the keeping it real persona that she gives, y'all fall for that shit hook, line, and sinker every time. She stayed just dumb enough. And how y'all don't see that shit is behind me. Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles walked into a bar. A fight broke out. They both saw the shit. This whole not being educated enough, just enough not to get fully canceled, but not enough to be held accountable with some fucking depth to it. Performative ignorance. Performative ignorance, feeding this strategic career survival thing you got going on. This has been a long ass video, but I'm gonna wrap this up by saying Jess Hilarious is not just ignorant. She is not just ignorant. And we gotta stop just flattening her and letting her escape robust change by just saying she's just ignorant. Jess Hilarious is overfed by trauma, by applause, by the algorithm, by ancestry, by patriarchy, by pain. And guess what? We don't heal that by yelling at her and by pushing her content further into the algorithm. I think we heal it by refusing to echo it, even in the name of representation. I have a dream. I really do have a dream that when people like Jess make these fuck shit comments, that folk go radio silent. No reposts, no reels, Not even YouTube videos like this one. Radio silent. I have a dream that when people like Jess Hilarious make these type of videos, we bring Jess Hilarious and iHeartMedia to their fucking knees. Radio silent. That's it. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you made it all the way through this video on all of this stuff, on Jess Hilarious, on transphobia, on blackness, on ancestry. The only thing I don't have time for are sentiments like, it's not that serious. Why do we expect so much from Jess Hilarious? Like, I get it, but no, I don't have time for that on this video. So share your experiences in the comments, what you think about it. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, all of that. I'm the Ignant intellectual, the bridge between the hood and the ivory tower. Black brilliance, formal education, not required. You ain't gotta agree with me, but at least know why you think what you think. Peace.